Alrighty, welcome. We're live. Jimmy Yang, what's going on, man?
It's going well. How are you, Johnny?
Doing very well. And to all the viewers tuning in to the land of and on the respective channels, welcome to Hey Brother, How Are You Really Doing? Our Thursday night showcase here where men get together and talk about what's going on in our lives, what's happening in our hearts, what's real for us. And we also talk about politics, about life, about what's the matter with men and boys, what's going wrong, what's going right, and really just demonstrate to a live audience that men are capable of introspection, reflection, emotional development, and growth, and hopefully inspire a little bit of hope because there tends to be a lot of pessimism, I think, right now around the state of men and boys. So yeah, that's what we're here to chat about today is men, boys, masculinity, and specifically how it relates to international policy, foreign relations, American foreign policy, and we know Jenna's not with us this evening, so I'm going to add some razzmatazz on the show and really talk to you a lot more also about the work that I do with my organization, Hey Brother Co., which is a men's work organization helping men and boys unlearn patriarchal standards of masculinity and access our full emotional human selves. So, Jimmy, we've known each other for a couple of years now, huh?
More than a couple of years. Let's say
More than a couple of
almost
years.
9 years now.
Almost 9 years. Yeah. How did
Yeah.
we meet?
So you were my Delion in my freshman year. For those of you who haven't gone to Rochester, it's like you're kind of like part of the residential staff. You're like a coach, or like you help the freshman students adjust. Yeah, you're my Delion, and you were a pretty awesome Delion, and I had a great relationship with you, and so we stayed in touch ever since.
Yeah. DeLion is short for dandelion, which is the school flower at the University of Rochester. I don't know if everyone else is aware of their school flowers, but we have one at the U of R. And so dandelion is like, yeah, like the coach, the spirit guide person for the freshman residence halls. And yeah, I had the pleasure of living with Jimmy during his freshman year and my sophomore year of college. And yeah, we've been tight ever since. And you've attended Hey Brother Co. virtual men's groups,
Yep.
in-person events that pop up in the city.
Yep.
And it's been a wonderful 9 going on almost 10 years next year of knowing you, brother.
Here's to that. Dude, the
Yeah,
crazy
here's
thing
to
is,
that.
Johnny knew me when I had glasses before I got eye surgery.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and I still have glasses. I'm just wearing contacts right now. Um, so the point of this show is to not only get at the heart of what it is that we want to talk about in our personal lives, but to showcase for other people again that we can speak about global affairs, about what's happening across the world, across the nation, and apply a lens that is more than just the standard, like capitalist, patriarchal, kind of emotionless lens.
Sure.
And I wanted to bring you on the show tonight in particular because you're someone who I deeply admire for many reasons. Not just that you are like a kind, sweet, warm guy, but you're really, really intelligent. And I rely on you for a lot of my information around foreign policy because you're my foreign policy friend. You're actually going to go to school for foreign policy at Columbia next year. And you are always posting so many informative things on like your personal commentary. You're writing about it. You started a Substack blog post recently on on all things foreign policy and international affairs. So I brought you on to talk to you about this because I feel like we're existing at a historical moment in time where like masculinity in men is inextricable from like fomenting wartime and like descent
Yeah.
into fascism and right leaning, political leanings across many countries, including the United States. So that's like my overall thesis of why I wanted to bring you on and talk to you.
Well, thank you for the kind words, and thank you so much for bringing me on. It's I really appreciate that you want me to be, a part of your project, and I think it is super important at this time because, like you said, international the world is becoming more, I guess, unstable place, right? International armed conflict is increasing, and I think a lot of nations want to train their populations to be more martial and more warlike. They want to encourage these more toxic aspects of masculinity so that, if a war breaks out, it's easier to conscript their nation's men.
Yeah, I mean, that starting point right there. You're absolutely right, spot on. Like I think a lot of the mainstream discourse around masculinity and just also like culture wars and painting targets for men to feel angry at
Yep.
allows them to become more susceptible to indoctrination and eventual conscription into the military and
Yep.
into police forces. So, which is indeed what we talked about last week. Thank you, inappropriate innuendo, for the callback. And Jimmy, I don't know if you've opened the chat as well, like the sidebar chat
Yes, I
in our
have.
restream. Sweet,
Yeah.
so we can see what's happening, and that's
Got
where
it.
messages from the audience will happen. So I've got a couple questions for you, Jimmy, that I want to ask, and
Sure.
we can go with the flow of conversations. But I feel I'm a little late in asking this, but I want to open with, before we really dive deeper into the geopolitics and the policy and the masculinity indoctrination and all of that stuff, I want to know, how are you really doing and what is on your heart these days?
Sure. So I'll be honest. I think personally, I've been a mix of ups and downs. So I'm still trying to figure out my career aspects, like exploring different career paths. I was traditionally HR data analytics, and I'm finding that that isn't quite a right fit for me. So I'm figuring things out, like with my Columbia acceptance. And with Columbia, I'm trying to get financial aid for it. And I'll be honest with you, it feels like, like when you ask professors to write letters of recommendation for you, it feels like you're begging them, for a favor, which kind of sucks. But I always try to never try to burn any bridges. I always try to keep those relationships very positive, and so I find that it does help when you do need to call them for a favor. So that's how I'm doing. How are you doing, Johnny?
Thank you so much for that vulnerable share. And yeah,
Yeah.
we're all figuring things out, and it's tough to be in a time of transition when you're figuring out what do you want to do with your life, what do you want to do with your career, and at the
Right.
same time even be asked, I'm sure, to like share something like from my perspective that you have deep knowledge and expertise, but the fact that you're going through transition in another realm might make you feel like either self-conscious or like doubting of, should I be I feel that way a lot too, because I'm
Of
going through a
course.
time of transition right now. So I just want to affirm, like, regardless of the tumult of being in transition, I'm so glad you're here. And I'm really, really grateful for you to share your perspectives. And I feel the same way about asking professors for recommendations. In fact, I dropped the ball recently on even reaching out to a professor. I was too nervous to
Yeah.
like follow through, because I felt there was too much I would have to explain in my own life since they last knew of me that
Right.
inhibited me from doing so. So I commend you for getting into Columbia. That's huge.
Thank you.
Ivy League institution. I hope you're very, very proud of that.
Thank you.
And
I,
yeah, and everything is going to work out, I trust.
I hope so too. I pray. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think, and that's why we want spaces like this, right? We want to be more open with our sort of our feelings, our internal state, so that we don't feel this kind of thing that we feel is lessened, because we know that a lot of other people are going through it. And there's solidarity in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, but at the same time, like speaking of solidarity, studying these extreme, even as a personal interest, right before you actually start school, like this is something that you research, you study, you live and breathe. Like thinking of geopolitics, what's going on, cultural tide shifts,
Yep.
and as it relates to how we think and act as consumers, as voters.
Yeah.
And state actors, all of the rest. So this is heavy stuff that can
Mhm.
sometimes make us feel quite alone,
Yeah.
especially if you're looking at it from this like overall analysis of how our nations interacting with one another. I feel like you can sometimes feel both disheartened and like an island. So how do you make space for yourself to think, to breathe, when and to feel less alone when you're studying these really heavy topics?
Mhm. That's a good question. That's a good question. And I would say the way that I try to, make myself feel less alone. There's several approaches. So one, I try to remember my own family history. So I was born in China, and I talked with my grandparents and my parents about their experiences of living through like World War II and the Chinese Civil War, and the upheaval under Chairman Mao. And so I recognized that what we lived through was just another iteration of that. I don't think there's ever going to be like a quote unquote steady state in history. We'll always be living. Every generation feels like the challenges they're dealing with are unique to them, and that the world is on fire. So I try to keep that in mind. And when you go into this kind of space, there's a community around it. I'm in a WhatsApp group for my Columbia MPA class, or rather, it's not my class, I deferred from it, but regardless. And so we talk about things like, for example, the recent changes around H-1B policy and things like that.
Yeah.
And so because of that shared community, we're able to we're able to sort of talk out sort of our fears and our concerns, and we're able to plan forward together with other people.
And for those of you on the stream who are tuning in internationally, can you just quickly mention what is H-1B? When you say H-1B changes, what are those changes in the United States? What does that mean?
Sure. So H-1B is a visa that a lot of international graduates from American universities or even abroad, they try to get, as it allows them to work in the United States long term. I think it's 10 years or so. Uh, and they're disproportionately with white collar knowledge work jobs. Recently, the Trump administration announced these sweeping changes to H-1B. They were going to basically charge every company $100,000 each for every H-1B employee that they ever hired or that they currently hire. And the intent of this policy is to basically cripple the program overnight and force them to get rid of H-1Bs to hire American citizens. That was it's one of those like taco Trump always chickens out situation, because as soon as he announced his policy, it immediately changed again. So now apparently it's only
Taco.
H-1B. Yeah, it's a Wall Street acronym. It's now apparently only applies to H-1Bs that are currently abroad that have not attended American universities. With this landscape, it always shout out to Jay Nice. With this landscape, it changes so rapidly that it's very hard to, I guess, get an idea of where this policy is at any one moment. I have friends who are in immigration law, and they're basically constantly checking the news for this.
Yeah, I've that's the first time that I've heard taco. Trump always chickens out, and I'm going to be using that from now on. I love that. Thank you for sharing that on the stream. Taco,
Yeah.
Trump always chickens out. It's one of those examples.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of different like threads that I want to tease out here, and you can choose which one you want to explore further, right? And maybe we can talk about all of them through the rest of the conversation. But for the sake of time, I'll like list some bullets, and then either chat can chime in or you can select like which ones to go through. I think there's a really wonderful thread to tease about China. That's a country that I've lived in, that you're from, you were born in, your family's Chinese. And the idea of like a patriarchal or father figure, authoritarian father figure as the ruler of our country, I think we can identify like now the United States, Russia, China, now all have these, right? Xi Jinping, Putin, and Donald Trump. And just wanted to reflect specifically with China, the perceptions of Xi versus the perspectives we have here in the United States of like Trump. Another thread that I want to maybe tease out though is like how does that sentiment, the action from our ruler, Trump, changing H-1B visas to de-incentivize or disincentivize corporations from hiring international people because they make it too expensive. How do you think that affects the way or like contributes to pre-existing dialogue on xenophobia, like in hate and treating migrants and immigrants as other, and like vilifying them. And then a third thread that I want to tease at is like, what does it mean to you to be someone who wants to change international policy or be like involved in this world, right? You applied for a master's degree in this. Like, what does that mean to you? Those are my three threads. Which one do you want to choose?
The three threads, just to recap, this idea of a father figure in international relations, especially among the world's three great powers. This idea of, how does this harsh policy towards migrants impact sort of our culture, and the third is, how do I feel about it? So I'll choose a second thread. So I would say, so on one hand, I do understand there is a kernel of truth to where some of Trump's concerns are, in that there is some corporate espionage and some academic espionage by certain Chinese nationals that enter the United States. I think this has gone back to under the Obama and Bush administrations, but I think this sort of idea that Trump has, it's not one that's baited in any sort of like, I guess, like calmly rooted objective in trying to figure this out. It's very much based in like a xenophobic, this fear of China as a rising power, echoing past sentiments of Yellow Peril. And so I think, when it comes to this sort of, I guess, when it comes to this sort of policy, I think that the big concern is that we want there to be bridges between China and the United States. We want the two world's greatest powers to understand what each other's cultures are like, and to have this a glimpse. Because when we don't have this kind of common understanding, that's how nations accidentally stumble into war. They misjudge what each other's intentions are. They misjudge where the opposite sides' red lines are, and it's easier to dehumanize them. And so, again, as a result, nations end up going to war with each other. So, I think it's a policy where it has to be very carefully managed. And at the end of the day, we want there to be very open connection between the United States and China, so that there's a lot of cross-cultural collaboration. We will need China's help on issues like climate change and space exploration and all these other fields of technology. And it would be a shame to cut those avenues off, especially given such existential challenges that face humanity.
That was very, very well put. We need, and as a message of unity that I think that I wish more of our current state leaders held in their minds and their hearts. Right, like global unity, cooperation, and it sounds actually quite radical
Yeah.
compared to much of the mainstream political discourse that I hear internationally and here in the U.S. So something that I am thinking with regard to the authoritarian father figure archetype, right,
Mm-hmm.
is that the nonprofit Equimundo releases a State of American Men report every 2 years. And in their 2023 report, they surveyed over 2,000 men over the age of 18 in the United States and found that demographically representative of the US.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that 40% of men experience depressive symptoms, and 2/3 of young men specifically feel that nobody really knows them, okay, are
Mm-hmm.
feeling unknown. So, how do you, when you hear those statistics and that concept, how do you think that relates to the political strongmen globally? Putin, Trump, Erdogan, Xi Jinping. Do you see a link between like male loneliness and the appeal of these authoritarian father figures?
Yeah, absolutely. Since you mentioned Putin, I'll use them as an example. Where in Russia there are a lot of these sort of youth groups, like there's a youth army, there's the first of our movement. There's a lot of these youth groups, and some of them aren't explicitly politicized, or like Boy Scouts with guns, but all of them have the idea that sort of the father figure is this redemptive figure that will save the nation, and they want to funnel young men and young women to these groups that still have to carry some sort of political messaging. So all of these groups are designed in mind to teach this very mythologized version of Russian history to these kids, and all these groups are designed in mind so that these kids will, when they leave, are going to serve the Russian military industry complex in some way, whether it's directly fighting on the front lines or serving in the war, like the munitions factories or something along that sort.
So let me get that right. The common thread in a lot of, oh, and then we have something in chat here. Do you
Yeah.
think that the Chinese and American people are the ones that have to connect cross borders to solve problems, or will governments always get in the way? So do you see there being more of a human to human connection?
I think that space can still exist as long as there's healthy civil societies in both countries. If we end up in a situation where one of these countries ends up going the way of that Russia did, where all civil society has been completely diminished, I think that becomes a lot harder. But I think there's a lot less risk for that happening in China and Russia because there's still a lot of active NGOs and academic organizations and even corporations that do rely on this sort of cross collaboration. So, for example, I worked at Warner Music Group, and Warner Music's biggest focus is to try to pivot into the Asian media market because it's where new media is growing the most. And so, as a result, that does encourage some sort of, because that the businesses that's inside the lines, hopefully that does encourage some sort of cross cultural collaboration.
I would hope so. I think that when there is a profit motive, sometimes like it can unify, yeah, the private sector and unify individuals who work for those companies. But I'm
Yeah.
also curious, like how many U.S. college students and how many Chinese international students end up becoming friends and like learning from one another. Like my hope is that it's a lot more. And obviously it's a college, looking only at college people is a select group, but generally speaking, my fear is that like U.S. citizens are a bit too xenophobic to like have a desire to learn more about other cultures, other places, and specifically China.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like China's not the top. I studied abroad. I lived in China for 7 months. I studied abroad there. I did a State Department critical language scholarship in Xi'an for 2 months, and then I spent a month in Hong Kong, and then did a fall semester in Shanghai, in which I also got to travel to many other cities in China. And I've been studying Mandarin since I was quite young, so I was definitely like the outlier in most
Right.
of my friend groups by selecting China as my study abroad place, whereas like a lot of European countries or Australia and New Zealand have huge cohorts of people that go to their to like
Yeah.
hundreds of kids versus there were like 8 kids or maybe 9 in one of my programs, right?
Yeah.
So I see that being a much less like chosen destination and a much just a culture and a place that most Americans don't know as much about or care to learn as much about.
Mhm.
And do you see that evolving in coming decades because of the necessity of our two global powers relating and interacting?
I think I do see that evolving with a caveat. As you know, TikTok is a very large platform in the United States, and Xiaohongshu or Red Note has also grown in popularity. And I
Mm-hmm.
think on one hand that is good in that it allows it allows more Americans to see aspects of Chinese culture that they might not otherwise see because these are Chinese social media platforms. But on the other hand, both platforms' algorithms are controlled by the Communist Party. The Communist Party, the China's National Internet Censorship Agency owns a golden share in ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok, and so of course that does influence what kind of content the algorithm will show, which then leads to the concern that it will show a very curated content that, for example, may not be honest about the state of like for example, the state of masculinity in China or China's policy versus Taiwan or something like that. So I think there's a double edged sword to this in that increasing Chinese soft power can help build that bridge, but we do have to be kind of, I guess, hopefully there is a way to guide it so that there's a more neutral space where we can discuss it.
Yeah, I think that at present American soft power is more influential in China than the vice versa, right? Like I would say
Yes.
there are more Chinese NBA fans, right? Like Chinese
Yes.
people love basketball, right?
Yes.
Like absolutely love basketball,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
and irrespective of Jeremy Lin, irrespective of Yao Ming, irrespective of that, like Chinese people love basketball.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that like Americans love, like Tai Chi or like badminton or table tennis or kung fu or like anything in this
Mhm.
to the same equivalent. There's no like, yeah,
I would say
reciprocal
for now there isn't, but I
for
will say
now.
that
Yeah.
yeah, one of the there are these video game award conferences, and one of the top selling video games that came out last year was a Chinese video game called Black Myth Wukong, and
Yes.
it swept, like for example, the 2024 Steam Awards. Steam is like the top video game online retail platform, and it swept a bunch. It was nominated for a lot of awards with other video game ceremonies as well. So I just bring that up to say these things are changing. When it will hit that threshold is unknown.
I did not know that Black Myth. I had heard of the game, but I didn't know as much about it because I'm more out of the gaming world than I used to be. So that was really cool to learn. I see something in chat from Jay saying, "Do you think there's actually risk to Americans to have their data stolen by TikTok/China? Was there legitimate risk there?" I think that's an interesting, just like from your perspective.
I think I think there is, of course, there is a risk. Even though TikTok CEO will say that the data is stored within servers in Singapore and the U.S., um, there's still a lack of transparency regarding sort of the internal affairs of the company, right? And I think it makes sense that China would want to have access to this data because the algorithm, even after the recent deal with Larry Ellison and Oracle, the ownership of the algorithm is still within the party's hands. And it is a way to influence how Americans feel about certain geopolitical topics. So, for example, with the war in Ukraine, there's social media studies that have found that posts about the war in Ukraine, particularly for the pro-Ukrainian side, are get buried within the algorithm. And it makes sense that China would want to uh, set the algorithms in such a way because China it supports more a Russia side ish in the war, and so as a result, that's the foreign policy stance that it takes is then going to be reflected in what kinds of content is allowed to circulate on the algorithm. So I think
Mm.
there's a risk, not in that, it's not the Fox News sort of like fear mongering of China's going to see like what you're buying or whatever, but it's more that the data will be used to train the algorithm that then shows you curated feed of content.
Gotcha, and gets you to sway and think about certain political or geopolitical issues from a
Yes.
certain angle. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And is that risk higher, let's say, than some of the American, like from than Meta, right? Like,
Yeah.
is it higher than Meta? Meta's utilization of our data in for that plus everything else. Like last year, it was either earlier this year or late last year that Mark Zuckerberg said we need a remasculinization of like we need to bring back more masculine energy into corporate America, right? So like our tech that is clear bias in a very specific way of one of the richest men in the world and
Of course.
someone who controls a large suite of the most utilized social media platforms in the world.
Yeah.
And so, like, is that how would you weigh those different
It's
risks?
it's pick your poison, right? Like I think uh, like every CEO that controls these tech companies have their own way on how like have their own intentions of how they want the algorithm to be swayed. Notably with Elon Musk and his control of Twitter, and so, but I think it's just that when it comes to specific American foreign policy issues, it's still a bit of a bigger liability to have the control of the algorithm in another state's power or like under the control of another state actor versus a private entity within that's still within your own country. Theoretically, the government, if it found a necessity to, would be able to easier pressure Zuckerberg than it would be to easier than ByteDance. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's still the fundamental sort of basics on the ground are still there, in that at least there's a theoretical sense of ownership that the government could exert over Facebook and Twitter in a way that it just can't over TikTok.
Yeah. I think I remember it was on Joe Rogan, like on
Oh,
an episode of Joe Rogan that Mark Zuckerberg was like, we need to basically bring like we have a politically neutered or like neutered workplace now in the past few years, and we need to remasculine the corporate America, remasculinize.
masculine.
Yeah, and that just I think like tying it back to this idea of a patriarch, an authoritarian father figure. That's I think we have our private sector, patriarchs such as Musk, Bezos, and Zuckerberg, and then we have our military and political leaders. Let me find another question here. I want to ask you.
Yeah.
So the process of fascism often glorifies this like mythical hypermasculine past, and we
Hmm.
saw that with Nazi Germany. We saw that with, or we're seeing that now with the United States, and I think see it in Russia as well.
Yeah,
Do
absolutely.
you think that the Chinese narrative on like China's like national rebirth, right?
Hmm.
And that project has that same lens to it because I think gender and gender relations are spoken about very distinctly in China in a different manner. So does it
Yeah.
have that? Does like Xi's vibe have the same flavor to it?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked this question now because yesterday was literally National Day in China, October 1st. That's when the communists won the Civil War. And yeah, I would say there is that there is sort of like a national rejuvenation idea that Xi Jinping wants to promote, right? Like you see sort of these headlines about how she is very critical of not as masculine sort of cultural, I guess, flashpoints in China. Like for example, the popularity of like these K-pop idols and how they don't represent traditional masculinity. And I think that's something that the party is aware of and wants to curb in a way that's not necessarily as explicit as it is in Russia or the United States, but it's still something. It's still a pressure that is there, especially as China builds up its military for example, potential invasion of Taiwan. Yeah.
And in terms of like building up military, what we had said at the beginning of the show too is that like the better you can make angry and isolated your
Right.
young male population, military aged men.
Yeah.
The more angry you can make them, the more isolated you can make them, the more likely they are to join the military and go and get that anger and aggressiveness out, or just be susceptible to believe in, you know,
Yeah.
like conspiracy theories,
Yeah.
and
Well,
much more.
I want to mention that recently there was this a recruitment ad by the PLAAF, the Chinese Air Force, and the ad is structured in a way where the pilot flies on a very successful mission, kind of like Top Gun, and it shows his backstory. And part of his backstory is this kid getting scolded and hit by his father and getting picked on in school. In general, just not feeling like a very like he feels like an outlier in society, and he joins the PLAAF. He starts flying these missions. He receives great mentorship from the colonels in the Air Force and superior officers, and eventually he's able to successfully do these like sort of barrel turns in the jet that he flies, and prove that he's made himself into a man that he can be proud of.
Wow. Do we
But that
have access to that clip? Would you be able to find that
I
on shorthand? If not, no worries.
not that shorthand, but if I can send it to you
Okay.
afterwards for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. Okay. I didn't realize that like Chinese, let's say like military ads and propaganda was the on that same level from the like the gendered stereotypes as US, because last week on the show we showcased some of the like ICE ads that have gone out, like ICE recruitment drives that have featured so many of these like hypermasculine tropes, and even one that was father son bonding, right? Like
Yeah.
that's like taking the caption
Yeah.
was taking father son bonding to a whole new level, and
Yeah.
the picture was like of an older guy and a younger man, both in like full military fatigues and and armor and gear, like, hey, join ICE, like we need dad and son troops to go and lock people up and abuse people and all these things. So yeah, the father son connection is alive and well anywhere where there is a pressing need
Mhm.
for military recruitment and for abuse of state power in order
Yeah.
to make men okay with abusing other human beings and enacting violence and control, which is what people in military and police forces do. You must desensitize them to seeing the humanity in others, and so you have to give them a target, such as in Nazi Germany, it was Jewish people and queer people. Here in the United States, it's trans people, queer people, and people
Migrants.
of color and migrants. Right now, it's migrants, and in in other places, I guess, yeah, you said there's been other phases of, right, yellow peril, this idea of like a red scare as well. There's all
Yeah.
of it, as if you can make a target, there's like, hey, this person over here, this group of people over here causing a lot of problems, and you can convince young men that that's the enemy, then you can make them do anything.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I wanted to mention something on the note where, for example, so this stems from the book that I read called Z Generation Into the Heart of Russia's Fascist Youth, by Ian Garner, who's a professor of totalitarianism and Russian history. And he wrote this book that explores how the youth generation is actually very shockingly supportive of the state, and how it's changed. In the 2000s, it was permissible to be queer in Russia, especially in the bigger cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg. It wasn't necessarily something that was easily accepted, but it was allowed to exist by the state. But as the Russian economy crashed due to a crash in oil prices in 2008, Putin needed a new focus, and that was revitalizing Russian nationalism. And then so he started to brand new enemies for the state. The Ukrainians, queer people, and liberals in Russia that are deemed as Western saboteurs. People alike. And so now there's along that wave was also a rise in social media, and Putin has been able to capture that rise in social media through the use of influencers who help spread his message. Uh, there's the head of the youth army is Nikita Nagorny, who is a gold medalist for the Russian gymnast team in the 2020 Olympics, and he like posts these very wholesome traditional posts with his wife and his kids. He'll be photogenically working out. He lives a very aspirational lifestyle, and then nestled in within those posts is him visiting Donetsk to visit Russian veterans to say these veterans are fighting for your freedom against the Ukrainian Nazis, or he'll occasionally make a post that warns that emphasizes how important it is to uphold Russian values and warns against elements of saboteurism, like being queer or being liberal. And so it's a way that the state has found to capture the rise or the changes in the attention economy to direct the attention of young people, particularly Gen Z, towards its narratives.
Whoa. That is wow.
Yep.
Wow. Not only, I mean, it's like not surprising and surprising at the same time, right? Like it's very shocking at how I'm sure like effective that is, because all
Mm-hmm.
you need is someone who's like athletic, fits traditional
He's tan.
patriarchal beauty standards.
He's very photogenic. Yeah.
Yeah, photogenic and is and has enough of. I mean, we see that right now with like the trad wife movement here in the United States, and any again like returns to and idealizing a form of traditional values that have strict gender roles and gender norms, and yeah, like romanticizes this life. But behind the scenes, it's also like there's a lot of money and privilege and access to that lifestyle.
Yes.
And it's a veneer as well, because a lot of influencers who will record a video in like very high quality of some pastoral fantasy, or of like, oh, it's my wife and kids, and like we're all, you know, look at us making our butter from churning our own butter or whatever. Ton of really expensive camera equipment, a lot of subscription services delivering them stuff. Like they have a business and a back end, just like we have a back end streaming here for, you know, our Twitch show. Like there's a lot of stuff and business and modernity involved in that. And for tradwives, especially, like tradwives are businesswomen, like they are feminist. In fact, that they are owning, they're a personal brand. They are making money from this content. So even though they are upholding a traditional standard online, they themselves do not adhere to that by virtue of putting it out there and making money. And it is used as a political and influential tool in the name
It's
influencers.
it's
Wow.
very ironic, right? Like, you know, the very feminism that allows them to have this business that preaches against feminism is something like, right? The fish does not realize it's in water.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That adage, I love that story.
Yeah.
Is like the, you know, the older,
Yeah.
the older fish is swimming in one direction, and he comes across two young fish, and they start to swim past each other, and as the older fish swims past, he looks at the two young fish, and he's like, you know, morning, fellas, the water's lovely today. And then the two young fish keep swimming past, and then after a second, they look at each other, and they're like, what's water?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So okay. The idea, so fascism, let's speak about fascism
Sure.
and Xi Jinping and masculine nationhood. So in fascist thought, there's the idea of the palingenesis, right? National rebirth through struggle specifically. And it's that through struggle that allows us to justify a possible like violent revolution, or
Yeah.
to justify kind of like Charlie Kirk saying like, oh, well, gun deaths are a necessary part of, you know, having freedom to
Right.
arm themselves, and like having a Second Amendment. Gun deaths are necessary.
It's a
Ironic, Charlie.
trade-off, is what
Yeah,
he
it's a
said.
trade-off,
Yeah.
right? It's a necessary trade-off. So in the same way, like fascist culture says, well, in order to have this national rebirth and return to a traditional, like pure national identity and state, we must struggle. It must be maybe a violent upheaval. And we've seen that right through in China, in Russia,
Right.
in the US.
Yeah.
Do you see Xi Jinping framing China's story in this way, that the nation must be reborn through discipline, sacrifice, and hyper control?
Yes, it's. I mean, it is part of what is emphasized in sort of the Chinese education curriculum, right? This idea of the century of humiliation, that period in the 19th and 20th century where China was a victim of European and Japanese imperialism, and how only through the Communist Party has China been able to redeem itself. But yet that century of humiliation has not been fully. The book on that chapter, the page on that chapter hasn't been fully turned over because Taiwan is still not a part of China yet. And so to finally finish that unfinished business, China needs to prepare for war with Taiwan to finally reunite the nation. And so, yeah, I would say, yeah, it is something that Xi Jinping encourages through through how he, you know, sets his ideology and influences the education curriculum in China. And it's something that it's something that comes from his personal experience as well, growing up in the Cultural Revolution. You know, his personal experiences taught him that the price of losing power is immense suffering. And so, you know, I feel like it's almost like a genuine belief that he feels that this is necessary.
Yeah, like more suffering will occur. So we have to suffer in order to achieve the objective, or even greater suffering. So choose like to you know, work hard, suffer, sacrifice in order to achieve the ideal, or
To
just
avoid the
suffer.
greater calamity.
To avoid the greater calamity. Exactly. And it is that painting specifically of the lesser of two evils that also will eventually become great and like make an amazing state.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really interesting. So you said it with like the Chinese Air Force advertisement, where there is kind of hypermasculinity or masculine tropes involved in this recruitment drive and in national identity stories. But do you see other elements of Xi's political project as a masculine project, right? Like this vision for a strong father figure nation standing tall against what's cast as like a decadent or weak Western democracy?
I would say so. I think it's a framing that the party wants to adopt, particularly as it relates to its soft power projects like the Belt and Road Initiative. As by standing as by positioning the nation as this sort of strong leading father figure, it can sort of overlap with that narrative of China as this sort of anti-Western order, neo-imperialist country that stands up for the rights of the global South, that stands for the rights of these African nations and Latin American nations against sort of the Western order. So yeah, these two narratives here almost intertwine.
Yeah. So it's kind of like every major political leader of a great power is kind of on this kick right now of talking about how we need strong men and we
Yeah.
need like men are too soft right now. And whether it's like men over there or men in our very own country or, men in a different culture, but like there's an urgent need for strong men, strong, right?
Yes.
Like a return to like a masculine archetype, men who could wage war, do war, and
Yeah.
do what's necessary in order to get to this next
Yeah.
stage. And I think we saw this recently as well with Pete Hegseth
Yeah.
and President Trump meeting with all of the military leaders. And some of the phrases that were used were like, "Hey, yeah, like we love our women warriors. But we need high physical standards that are gender neutral. But we do have a problem with weak men." So I think whenever you hear the phrases like strong men and military and like do what's necessary or
Right.
generals and strong men in the same sentence, it kind of feels like masculinity is becoming this militarized thing for political theater.
Yes.
Yeah, which is troubling, which is deeply troubling to me.
It is, right? Like because part of the concern is that this culture will then that you're cultivating on the ground will begin to affect its way upwards, and that might lead to poor decision making within the general staff or within, God forbid, the people who control the nuclear forces or something like that. So it's certainly a dangerous. It's certainly a dangerous thing to encourage, the idea to encourage, because it may come back to one day, haunt you down 20 years, 20, 30 years down the line.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think Hegseth's speech specifically. I have a clip from the Wall Street Journal on Instagram pulled up on the stream. I don't know if we can do the screen share here.
Go for it.
Let's see. We'll try this. Yeah, weak men won't qualify for some military jobs. I'll play this now.
Can you just up the volume?
Yes.
But when it comes to any job that requires physical power, performing combat, those physical standards must be high and gender neutral.
Can you turn up the volume more?
If women can make it,
It's as high as I can make it.
what it is.
The chat is saying they can't hear the audio.
Combat jobs,
Oh, no audio?
Yeah.
Okay. Share. Maybe I have to screen share that window. Oh, to share audio, share a tab instead. Okay, cool. Wait, let me share that specific tab. Apologies on the screen there. Cool. All right, cool. This will do it. Let me refresh and just make sure.
Because we're not playing games. We very much value the impact of female troops. Our female officers and NCOs are the absolute best in the world. But when it comes to any job that requires physical power to perform in combat, those physical standards must be high and gender neutral. If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is. If that means no women qualify for some combat jobs, so be it. That is not the intent, but it could be the result. So be it. It will also mean that weak men won't qualify because we're not playing games. This is combat. This is life or death. As we all know, this is you versus an enemy hell-bent on killing you. It will also mean...
All right. So there we go. Yeah, we can pull down the share. Perfect. So that right there, right? Like weak men won't qualify. This is combat. This is military. We need to be able to do what's necessary like that. Yeah, absolutely. That's political theater, and is really unsettling. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, especially the line, it's you versus the enemy that is trying to kill you, right? It's intended to make you scared. It's intended to keep you always on edge. So I guess, this I promise this is related. So in some gun safety classes, the first rule of gun safety is they teach you, don't point your gun at anything that you don't intend to shoot. But I do find in like a lot of gun safety classes, this message that they always hammer you is you need to be ready to protect yourself and your family. You need to be able to shoot when when the situation comes up. So it cultivates this sort of emergency mentality that then makes it easier for somebody to accidentally shoot another person or to engage in something that's very rash, a very rash life-altering decision. And it's the same thing with sort of it's a similar idea with sort of like Jay said, hypervigilance. But if you're always hypervigilant, it often actually leads to more error-prone decisions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's what every cop. I was scared for my life. That's why I killed someone. Or like my gun. I was scared.
Yeah.
That's like the main claim for the crazy levels of police killings that we have in this country is always like, well, I'm allowed to do it because I was scared for my life. I have qualified immunity, and so if we can manufacture a sense of fear and have that hypervigilance, as Jay said, then we have people who are activated and ready to kill, right, to wage war, which is what Bell Hooks, that's one of her whole like theses about patriarchy in her seminal work, The Will to Change Men, Masculinity, and Love, is she talks about how like under a patriarchal system, boys become recruits in a vast effort to indoctrinate them into the military ideals, right? Like, and to become soldiers. Now, whether or not you actually become a soldier and serve in the military is less relevant because a patriarchal conditioning is meant to prepare you for that. Right. So that there are going to be some men who become the boots on the ground, who become the boots on our necks, who become the black boots in the night, the secret police, the real police, the SWAT teams, the ICE agents, the like my dad, right? Like the murder battalion in the South African for the South African apartheid regime, who were trained in interrogation tactics by the apartheid secret police, like men who are willing to do that level of violence, or military soldiers. But then there's also men who are just like Republican bros, and Gen Z young men who watch Theo Von and Joe Rogan and the Nelk brothers who don't practice empathy. They are not emotionally skilled. And because they are not emotionally skilled and they have been trained under a patriarchal system, they are not able to empathize with other people, see other people's humanity, and then they make voting decisions based on that. And they spend with their dollars as consumers, and they vote in favor of things, and they're much more easily swayed by this sense of fear of like, hey, you better like, well, I don't know, I wanted eggs to be cheaper and I was scared of immigrants taking my job. So I voted in this way, right? And so that they are effectively also like those recruits. They've been recruited successfully to encourage and support and platform like fascism, militarization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is why in this most recent election, we had the largest contingent of Gen Z men who voted more conservatively than the previous generation ever before, which like is wild to me. Like it's very, again, it's very shocking. It's very scary. And is one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, it's time to like continue. Well, it's been time to raise the alarm bells, but let's continue to ring these bells and say, hey, like this is what happens. So for those folks, let's bring it back to China, because I would love to actually talk about this, like 男女平等问题, and which is gender equality, man,
Yeah,
man, woman equality problem.
이렇게
Yeah,
and
wait,
actually,
yeah,
Jenna has the same question, right? Like,
yeah,
does
yeah, yeah.
patriarchy look the same in China? Is also the same story, masculinity or insecurity. Yeah. So, I don't know if many people know this, but there's currently a youth unemployment crisis in China. Something we don't have exact figures for this because the government doesn't want to publish embarrassing figures, but Johnny's showing off too. But yeah, there's I would say it's about 20, as economists estimate, between 20 to 25% of the youth population in China is unemployed, and so as a result, that feeds
Do you say
into
25% roughly?
yeah,
Like that's a
roughly
conservative estimate, but like
yeah, roughly
probably wow.
20 to 25%, same as Spain, right? Um, so, and as a result, it does feed into these patriarchal sort of attitudes in that a lot of men feel like they have to work a very good job and they have to be able to buy an apartment in order to attract a wife, a partner. And so as a result, this concern, this anxiety about not being able to be a provider and not be able to find your place among society, that same dynamic exists in China as well. And it's part of why the PLA can make that, the Air Force ad I talked about earlier, in that there's a ready market to capitalize on its anxiety, and the state is trying to take advantage of it.
Yeah. I like so one of the first reasons why I became radicalized within understanding the urgency of like the intersection between feminism, foreign policy, and how gender is applied to everything is actually learning about China's one child policy, because
Yes.
this was something that youth unemployment that's is a staggering statistic,
Yeah.
and there's a lot there. And for example, men thinking they need to have an apartment and be wealthy before they can attract a wife, and having that
Yeah.
immense pressure, but not having a lot of economic prospects.
Yes.
That's something that's mirrored here in the United States and a lot of other places, but there's a unique flavor of it and twist there in China, because I think what a lot of women in China want, which is what a lot of women everywhere want, is a more emotionally skilled and comprehensive man, a man who is competent in a lot of ways
Yes.
in terms of understanding domestic labor. But because of China's one child policy and gender favoritism, preference for sons, and then reverence for sons and families, sons like like little kings, right? Like Baobei, like small treasures, little kings, like sons are treated as yeah, exactly. So Shaotai, little kings that are then babied. If you have like, oh, this is our youngest son, this is our firstborn son. Everyone in the family, but particularly women, female cousins, older sisters, everyone, their job, moms, grandmothers, is to make sure this kid is always eating well into his adulthood, and to prioritize everything, do his domestic labor for him, and so you have a large swath of men, Jimmy and Mai's age, a little bit younger, that have never had to wash a dish or wipe their own ass, basically, or do any of these things. And that is what makes them ineligible candidates for partnership, much more so than their lack of economic prospects, because the lack of economic prospects is something that is gender neutral. All young people are like experiencing this difficulty, but there's this gendered lens, which is crazy. But specifically with the one-child policy and how I was radicalized by it, like, I learned about this from when I was young, when I started speaking Chinese. I would say like the 90s and early 2000s is when a lot of news, I was born in 97, but like I would say so early 2000s, I started to learn about this a lot more. Like, what is the one child policy? And at the time, like when I was younger, I just took it I was like, oh, wow, like you're only allowed to have one kid in China. The government like mandates this. Okay, like that's crazy. Wow. And then as I got a little bit older, I got curious and I was like, well, how did they make that happen? Right? Like how does one enforce such a policy? Like, is it through fines? Probably fines, right? Like if you have a second kid, oh, we'll fine you. So I watched this documentary, One Child Nation, and another one called Hooligan Sparrow. And I started like learning, and a lot of these stories at the time were untold, because when the policies were first enacted in the late 80s and through the 90s, like the government was suppressing these stories. But the way that they did it was wide-scale tubal ligation operations, right? Fallopian tubal ligations.
Yep.
So the way in which this policy was administered, as you know, like for our viewers, is like they would have these squads of somewhat trained like nurses and surgeons and people that would go to villages across China and to places, and they would essentially like force women to get their tubes tied. And as we know, like for those who don't know, a vasectomy is a lot cheaper a lot quicker to perform, less invasive, less painful, and like would be more effective in this, but they dare not touch male genitalia in the same way, right? So and I'm like, we're laughing about this, but watching these documentaries, it is deplorable. It's so horrific. Not only that they are violating women's bodily autonomy in the same way we're trying to take away reproductive rights and reproductive access and healthcare access here in the United States, but there's so many other ramifications. For example, like people were killing girl babies, just leaving them to die, drowning them, like all, I don't know if I can even say this on stream, but like the types of things that citizens were doing because they either didn't want to get caught, didn't want to get fined, or they wanted to keep trying to have that preferred son. So that was one of the first, I guess, instances of political policy and foreign policy that I analyzed that got me like, oh my God, governments are like all over the world. This is a universal problem. This is not something that's specific to here in the U.S. with like Roe v. Wade and like our Christian nationalist state and whatever and puritanical values. Everywhere else where they want to have something happen, they will target women first and try to control women's bodies as the vehicles of the means of production, and by production of laborers, right? Production of people. So anyway, that was my diatribe. What are your thoughts on like and any elaboration there? China's one-child policy. We could talk about like how Hong Kong was the what's the word, like the secondary market for illegal adoptions, like kids that there's that. So a lot of people you're in my generation, you're in my age, who are claimed to have been orphans or put up for adoption were actually stolen. Like they were stolen, and they don't know who their parents. They have no access to that because anyway,
the records are kept in the dark.
The records are kept.
And I will say, if you know somebody who is like a Chinese person who's been adopted by American parents, chances are it's very likely that they're a girl, because a lot of female babies were put up for adoption. To piggyback off of that. One of the reasons why this was also encouraged was because there's this cultural expectation that daughters or sons can stay in the family and take care of the parents when they're older, but when you send a daughter to be married off, she won't be able to take care of you when you're older. And so for a lot of parents, they felt an anxiety as well, so that they needed to have a son, so that it was a sort of a way to have this insurance policy, for when you got to retirement age, especially because retirement homes and elderly nurses are kind of stigmatized in China. The other thing is that I wanted to say was that this dynamic where we have infanticide of disproportionate, female babies given up for adoption, of this, female genital mutilation, is that it kind of creates and exacerbates the same masculinity problem that we see today in China. There's something like 35 to 40 million fewer women than there are men. And so that competition dynamic that a lot of men feel is exacerbated by the fact that, just the numbers don't add up. And so on a sense, it almost validates that kind of fear, and that you do have to be like a little bit more, you do have to be more outstanding than your fellow male peers to be able to be eligible for a wife at all. So it's just a lot of downstream impacts that we still feel well into our present day.
Yeah, that's and with the more fierce competition for like as I'll talk how like an Andrew Tate or a Scott Galloway would talk about a mating market, right? The mating market. Isn't it funny that I said Andrew Tate and Scott Galloway in the same sentence, but to me on certain issues they speak in the same way, like red pill dudes and then like older economists / marketing dudes, like even if they boomer pill people say the same shit, right? Like so Scott Galloway does. Sorry, Scott, I would love to chat with you sometime, be on your podcast or whatever, but like you do talk like that sometimes. So the mating market, the increased competition and that mating market means that young men are so much more easily like give up hope and will be like, oh, like it's too like there's why try at all. And I feel like I saw some articles and propaganda about the I can't remember the name, but it was like the movement of people who don't want to work and are just like in Japan and Korea. Yes. Yeah. It's China, Japan, and Korea. Yes. Just like, I'm just, there's no point there. I'm never going to be able to afford a house. Like there's no point. So I'm just gonna, give up basically.
Yeah. it's I think it is a difficult issue to approach, partly because I think I think it's natural for I think this is more universal across genders, that you it's natural for a lot of people to feel sort of this desire, this yearning for romantic bonds, right? Like I think it's in some way it's innate to us. But I think the challenge then has to be to figure out a way to channel that productively, to view your partner, to view the opposite gender on equal terms as you, and to not and to give them the same rights, the same dignity that the state automatically affords men due to our patriarchal norms.
Yeah. Well said, Jimmy. That's a clip right there.
Thanks.
Another so China's one child policy and the implementation of that was like a fucked up like version of a Handmaid's Tale
Yes.
type thing, right? Where like women's
Yes.
bodies are the thing that we're going to control to advance a political agenda and structure society around. And we're seeing that here in the United States already in a different way, though, right? So instead of like forcing tubal ligation and trying to force population control
Right.
in that way, we are trying to remove women's access to basically say no to be incubators for baby incubators and worker and soldier incubators. Like that's the grand agenda, is like whether it's through sexual assault or like incest or like whatever it is, have those kids, especially if they are going to be impoverished, because they will either be part of the school to prison pipeline and become like slaves and indentured, workers through our privatized prison system, or they're going to become cops and soldiers as a way to get out and have a couple 3 square meals a day and go and advance,
Our nation's flag.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Our nation's flag.
Yeah.
And all of that. So we're seeing that play out in a very different way. But I think we can use China and the one child policy as an example of like some of the downstream consequences, right?
Yes.
So with both a gender inequality, where there's so many more men than women now in China, but also like women don't want to date men.
Yes.
And we're like, so women, if women are going to be forced to have children or not have access to contraception or reproductive health care, and life-saving healthcare like that, then they're going to opt to not take the risk, and already are not going to want, like already women who date men or are attracted to men are dating fewer men.
Yes.
Right, because most men here in the United States too, like again, don't have emotional skills, don't understand domestic labor, care work, all of these things. So a lot of women are opting out, and this frustrates young men, makes them apathetic. Either, okay, there's no point in working anymore, the standards are too high, and then where do they turn that anger and frustration? Well, as we just said, to the military or to an Andrew Tate, or to like they go to the red pill manosphere content pipeline to get sucked up by patriarchal standards and then go and regurgitate them and reinforce them elsewhere.
Right.
So I think that's kind of like we can use that as an
As an
example, a
allegory.
parallel. Yeah, an allegory, exactly.
There's something I wanted to mention as well, which is that both sort of what we're seeing here with the restrictions on women's rights and this, patriarchal attitudes for women towards women in the U.S. and the one-child policy is that both came from a demographic anxiety. So back in the 1970s, when they made the one-child policy, there was a popularity in the world called neo-Malthusianism, the idea that there'd be too many people on the earth, and that the earth's resources couldn't sustain them all, and that you have to figure out a way to cull the population somewhat. And now we have a similarly reflective demographic anxiety in the United States, great replacement theory, where there's a concern that the white population of America will get replaced by black and brown and people of color populations. And I think for both instances, it creates this pressure then to enact these policies, and it worsens the dynamic because women are treated as broodmares or as these tools rather than people with agency. So in order to address the problem, then a big part of what you'll have to tackle is to address this or like this demographic anxiety, to take the foot off the gas. It doesn't have to be so urgent or this like such existential thing. You have to figure out a way to combat that attitude as well.
Yeah. So let's shift because we're closing here, just like time check.
Yes.
We're coming up on 10 o'clock. So maybe do you think you would do like 10, 15 more?
Sure. Yeah. 10, 15 more.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Because just to close, let's like talk about what are some of the ways that we could shift this cultural narrative. I have some thoughts and opinions, but like, what are you seeing that gives you hope, that can help reverse some of that, both either great replacement theory or specifically with regard to like masculinization and like we need weak, there are too many weak men. We need strong men. There are too many feminine girly boys, and we need who wear chokers and have earrings underneath their Bose headphones and like whatever else, right? Like we need strong men.
Sure.
Yeah. What are some of your thoughts there?
So I think so. As part of, some of my thoughts are that when it comes to your own idea of why do you want kids, you want to have kids because they bring joy to your life, because you want to raise a person to be a very well-adjusted member of society, and you want to impart your own values, your own positive vision that you see for the world onto your kids, instead of viewing having kids as this like this mission that you have to fulfill, or as like a way to like sow your seed or build your legacy, like how Elon Musk does. The mindset shift needs to be different. You're having kids because you're raising a person, and you want them to have a positive impact on the world, and instead of leaving a legacy behind for when you're gone. So that mindset shift is important. I think the other thing is that, again, building a sense of community that encourages diversity and dissent, right? Like, instead of having sort of like a monocultural, a homogenous community space, we want to proactively build community spaces, which is what you're doing with Hey Brother Co. to encourage these visions for positive masculinity, so that these ideas can be reinforced in real time through that community. So these are sort of the two thoughts I have.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I love that, going from selfishness to selflessness as far
Yes.
as, no, the selfish and ego-driven desire to
Yes.
create and preserve a legacy, to
Yes.
the somewhat selfish, but like I want joy in my life. Yes, I want my children. Like children bring joy inherently. Like the process of being a parent and helping create connection with a young person, with a child, like is a very beautiful thing that teaches you a lot about yourself, teaches you a lot about the world, and also gives you the possibility to leave the world better than you found it by teaching someone how to be better, how to break cycles, right? Like to basically have a better upbringing than you had, or to not suffer from some of the same, like parental pressures or whatever it is. So I love that reframe there. And then the second one of, thank you for the Hey Brother Co shout out, that like, I agree. I think what we desperately need is to have a greater number of community connections and like gender solidarity amongst men, not in a scary, horrible, Proud Boys, white supremacist, red pill manosphere like a way, but in a way that makes men feel, as Jenna says in chat, allows men to love, be loved, to see and to be seen by one another, right?
Yeah.
I want this world. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to shout out the chat as well. As Jay and I said, abundance versus scarcity mindset.
Yeah, abundance versus scarcity mindset, right? Like that we have there's an abundance of love, there's an abundance of connection. We don't have to be scared that it's going to be taken away from us, because you can create that sense of brotherhood everywhere you go. You can find value and regulation and nervous system and emotional regulation from connection with men. And homophobia is the prison, brothers. Like, and homophobia is the prison, much like when the state tells you to fear weak men and to fear effeminate men and men who, the state is saying, don't hug, do not hug your brother, do not care, do not love, because if you do that, you're not going to want to suit up and kill him.
Yes.
if you hug your brother, you're not going to want to suit up and work for me and go kill someone somewhere else, right? So that's the message of the state, is that to be a strong man is to be unfeeling and to want to dominate, and that you bond over cruelty towards other people. You bond over locking people up in detention centers and abusing people. That's the way that men get together and spend time. So what we need in this country and in the world is for men to get together and to love, see, be seen, as Jenna said in chat. That's what we need.
Yes. Very well said.
So thank you, brother. I think we need more like positive masculinity kind of influencers. That's what I'm trying to be. I'm trying to create as much online content as possible, and I'm not perfect. I'm still figuring out like my system for this, but I want to like model what I wish to see in the world, and that's why I invited you on this stream, Jimmy. Like I invited one of my brothers, one of the people that I've known you for almost a decade, who I'm like, you're smart as hell. I love you. Like I want to chat with you about these things, because we have now created the type of bond that I wish a lot of men had access to, right? Where I'm like, like, I fucking love my peer.
Yeah.
He knows a lot about things. I want to pick his brain. And we've also exchanged so many sweet, intimate moments, right? Like ice skating together,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
every time I get, yeah. So I just wish that a lot more men like could see what comes from this, and it's so much more fun to laugh about life and also lament about the state of the world with a good brother than it is to say like women are the problem.
Well, and I love you for the fact that you create a space where we can just be relaxed. We don't have to be so guarded, and we can be our authentic, genuine selves. Like it's very rare to find that in the world nowadays.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, brother. Let's all on the stream collectively take a breath wherever you are, sitting or standing. You can keep your eyes open or you can shut your eyes closed, and you can take a big deep breath in through your nose. And as you breathe deeply, try to feel the air coming in through your nasal passage, down your throat, and see if it can fill up your belly. And sigh it out, exhale. Yeah. A nice deep breath helps me ground myself, and helps me feel more calm. Maybe I should incorporate more breathing into this. Hey, brother, how are you really doing? So
Do you do meditation?
I don't meditate. I don't have a meditation practice. I have a deep breathing practice where I sometimes, especially mostly in the car actually, where I'll like consciously while I'm going and doing something else, but I very rarely will close my eyes and meditate. But I'm very good at leading other people through guided like facility, as you know, virtually. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Right. Like I'm really good at that, but I don't have it for myself because I'm constantly, like go, distracted. And like,
Uh,
so I got to
can I
work
give
on
you a
that.
recommendation?
Please.
So you know that channel Healthy Gamer.
Yes, I do know Healthy Gamer. Yeah.
So the guy, as you might know about his backstory, he did some Vedic
Dr.
monk training.
K.
Dr. K, yeah, Dr. K did some Vedic monk training in India, and he learned these meditation techniques that he has on his website. I think it does have a paywall. I think it's like $20 for his meditation course. But in my mind, it was $20 worth spending because it gave me access to these more advanced meditation practices that you don't really find anywhere else.
Thank you for that recommendation. I wonder if Dr. K has a Twitch stream that we could raid next time, where we could bring people
Right?
on. And I don't know if he's on Twitch, but yeah, Dr. K and Healthy Gamer is a channel that I really like. I probably should watch more of his videos, but I love it whenever he pops up onto my feed because I think he does give really really great tips for men that are, I think he's in many ways a lot more palatable. Yeah, Healthy Gamer GG. I guess he does less streaming now
He
than he used
does
to.
he does streaming now on YouTube and his own members platform, not on Twitch anymore. But there are still a lot of
Gotcha.
public streams on YouTube, that he'll do bi-weekly or monthly or so.
Right on. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful to know. But I love his content and think that he's a lot more palatable to men than I am in many ways. And I'm trying to get like Dr. K, but I have my own unique way. But thank you so much for your time, Jimmy, and for everyone tuning in to Hey Brother, How Are You Really Doing? Our weekly Thursday night exploration of the world, of ourselves, of this concept of brotherhood, men, masculinity. Do we have any music streamers that we could raid?
Conrad?
The main music. I was just thinking I was going to be like Conrad's going to be on next week. Yeah, Conrad's going to be on next week, and I'm so really excited to chat with him next week. But Conrad Taylor, shout out to Conrad Taylor, is a wonderful musician, DJ, EDM music producer who is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the only like truly healthy masculinity coded like DJs out there. Yeah, who like he and I made a song together last year called "Boys Expressing Their Feelings" that sampled a clip from the show Recess Therapy, where these little boys were being interviewed by Julian Shapiro Barnum in New York City, and he was asking them like, is it bad to express your feelings? And these little boys were like, no, it's really strong. Like, it's not weak to express your feelings. It's really strong. Guys want to be tough and stuff, but it's like good to express yourself. And it was so cute. So yeah, we sampled that and made it into like a tropical house remix. And he's made a couple other songs that are really in that vein of like high energy or, dance music that you'd hear at a club or at a rave or at a festival. But the messaging there is for boys and men to become more comfortable with themselves, to dance, to express ourselves. So shout out Conrad Taylor. He'll be on the stream next week to talk all about his musical career. And Jimmy and Conrad and I all know each other and have gone to Conrad's shows. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Thanks for all the questions in chat. And
Thank you for hosting.
Of course. Yeah. I look to have you. I would love to have you back on sometime if you're ever interested. And yeah, Jenna said so as well. Like, come back to speak more on our foreign policy shows. They have other shows on the Land of And where you would be an amazing guest. And I was really impressed with not just your eloquence and articulation, but like your depth of knowledge, and very, very proud of you from the 18-year-old young man that I met at the University of Rochester in 2016 to who you are now. You're just a really, really amazing guy, Jimmy. Thank you.
Thanks. You as well. Great mentor.
You as well, brother. Okay, so we're going to tune out. So thank you so much to everyone. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll talk to you next week. All right.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.